My name is Helen Martin. For the last 40 years, I've been a mother, a provider, and a problem solver. But for the last 5 years, since my daughter Sarah and her family moved in, I've become something else entirely. I've become invisible. A ghost in the house I built with my own 2 hands. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow fade, like an old photograph left in the sun. It started with small things. My opinion on dinner no longer mattered. The TV was always on a channel I didn't choose. My corner armchair, the one I bought after retiring, was slowly taken over by my son-in-law Mike's overflowing pile of job-seeking paperwork. I told myself it was fine. This is what families do. You adapt. You make space. But lately, the space I was being asked to make was for my own absence. The whispers started a few months ago. I'd be in the kitchen, and I'd hear my granddaughter, 11-year-old Chloe, complaining to her mother. "Grandma is so slow. She took forever to make my toast this morning." Instead of correcting her, Sarah would just sigh and say, "I know, honey. Just be patient." Then it was my grandson, 13-year-old Leo. "Why does Grandma have to watch her shows so loud?" He'd ask, even though the volume was barely audible. Mike would just smirk from behind his laptop. "Old age, kid. It's a package deal." They spoke about me like I was a faulty appliance, a piece of the house that wasn't working correctly anymore. They never said it to my face, of course. To my face, it was all forced smiles and passive aggression. The breaking point didn't come with a shout. It came with a piece of paper. I was tidying up the kitchen counter one Tuesday morning after everyone had left. Sarah and Mike were always leaving messes, expecting me to clean them up. Tucked under a stack of junk mail was a glossy brochure. The picture on the front was of a sterile-looking building with a few elderly people sitting on a bench, smiling vacant smiles. The title read, "Maple Creek Assisted Living, Dignified Care on a Budget." My blood ran cold. I opened it. Someone, probably Sarah, had circled the section on shared rooms and financial assistance programs. They hadn't even bothered to hide it properly. It was left out. For me to find. It was a message, as clear as a handwritten note. "We are looking for a place to put you. We are researching how to do it cheaply." I sank into a kitchen chair, the brochure trembling in my hand. I wasn't just a ghost anymore. I was a problem they were actively trying to solve. For years, I had paid every bill in this house. The mortgage was paid off thanks to my 40 years at the textile factory, working my way up to supervisor. My retirement checks and the investments I had carefully managed since my husband Richard left us covered the electricity, the water, the gas, the internet they all used without a second thought. I bought the groceries they ate, the new shoes Leo wore, the art supplies Chloe used. And this was my reward. A brochure for a budget care home. Tears didn't come. Something else did. A strange, cold calm settled over me. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm. I looked around the kitchen, in my house. I saw the faint scratch on the floor where Sarah had dragged a chair as a child. I saw the china cabinet holding the dishes I had saved up for months to buy. I had poured my entire life into this family, into this home. I had raised Sarah alone after her father walked out on us, leaving me with nothing but a mountain of debt and a 3-year-old daughter. I worked double shifts, cleaned offices at night, and sold handmade clothes on the weekends just to make sure she never felt like she was missing out. I paid for her college degree, gave her and Mike the down payment for their first car, and welcomed them into my home when they fell on hard times, and for what? To be researched like a piece of unwanted furniture that needed to be offloaded. That night, I made dinner as always. Roasted chicken and vegetables. No one commented on it. Chloe complained it wasn't pizza. Leo was on his phone the entire time. Mike talked about a promising interview he had, the same story he'd been telling for the 6 months since he was laid off. Sarah looked at me with a flicker of something in her eyes, guilt, maybe? Or just impatience. She probably wondered why I hadn't mentioned the brochure. Why I wasn't making a scene, crying, or begging. It was because I was done making scenes. I was done begging for respect in my own home. I finished my meal in silence, collected my plate, and washed it. As I stood at the sink, with the warm water running over my hands, I made a decision. They wanted me gone? Fine. I would go. But I would go on my own terms. And they were about to learn what life was really like without the invisible woman who held their world together. After they had all gone to bed, I went into my room and quietly closed the door. I pulled an old shoebox from the back of my closet. Inside were all my important documents, the deed to the house, fully in my name. Bank statements for accounts they knew nothing about. Investment portfolios that had been growing steadily for decades. They saw me as a frail, annoying old woman. They had no idea I was the bank. They had no idea of the resources I commanded. They had never bothered to ask that I took out my old, worn address book and flipped through the pages. My fingers stopped on a name. Jean. My younger sister. We hadn't talked in a few months, just the usual holiday pleasantries. Life had gotten in the way. But I knew if there was one person in the world I could count on, it was her. I picked up my phone, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a strange, exhilarating sense of purpose. I stepped into the hallway, making sure everyone was asleep, then slipped into the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the tub, took a deep breath, and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy. "Helen? Is everything okay? It's almost midnight." "Jean," I whispered, my voice steadier than I expected. "Everything is not okay. But it's about to be. I need your help. I'm getting out." Jean was silent on the other end of the line for a moment, the sleepiness in her voice replaced by a sharp alertness. "Get out? Helen, what are you talking about? Get out of where?" "My own house," I said, the words tasting like metal. "They're trying to put me in a home, Jean. Sarah and Mike. They left a brochure for an assisted living facility on the counter for me to find. A cheap one." I heard a sharp intake of breath. "She didn't," Jean whispered, her voice a low growl of disbelief and fury. "After everything you've done for her? For them? Helen, that's not just ungrateful, that's monstrous." Her anger was like a warm blanket. For so long, I had been absorbing the family's subtle jabs and quiet dismissals alone, starting to believe that maybe I was the problem. Hearing my sister's immediate, unfiltered rage on my behalf was the validation I desperately needed. "I'm coming over right now," she declared. "No," I said firmly. "Not yet. That's the one thing I can't risk. They can't know I'm planning anything. I need to be smart about this. I need to move quietly." I explained my idea, the assets they knew nothing about, my plan to disappear from their lives and leave them to fend for themselves. "Good," Jean said, her voice filled with admiration. "Good for you. You listen to me, Helen. You do whatever you need to do. I have the guest room ready for you whenever you need it. A week, a month, a year, I don't care. You have a safe place to land. Just tell me what you need." We stayed on the phone for another hour, whispering as I laid out the first steps of my plan. By the time I hung up and crept back to my room, I felt a strength I hadn't felt since Richard walked out all those years ago. The next morning, I was the first one up, as always. I made coffee, packed lunches, and laid out breakfast. I moved through the motions like a well-rehearsed actor, a smile fixed on my face. When Sarah came downstairs, I simply said, "I have a few errands to run this morning, a doctor's appointment." She barely looked up from her phone. "Okay, Mom. Don't be late, Chloe has that after-school thing and needs a ride." The casual assumption that my time belonged to her was staggering. "I might be a while," I said calmly. "You should probably arrange for Mike to pick her up." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face before she shrugged and said, "Fine." My first stop was the downtown branch of my bank. My appointment was with Mr. Davies, a kind man who had managed my investments for the last 15 years. I sat across from his polished desk and laid out the whole story, my voice never wavering. He listened patiently, his expression growing more and more serious. When I finished, he didn't offer platitudes. He simply nodded and said, "Mrs. Martin, what you're describing is a form of financial abuse. And you are right to take steps to protect yourself." He turned his monitor towards me. On the screen was a chart with a sharp, upward climbing line. "This," he said, pointing to the line, "is you. This is 40 years of diligent saving and smart investing. You are in a very, very strong financial position." Seeing it laid out like that, in a bold, undeniable graph, was breathtaking. It was tangible proof of a life's work they had never seen, or chosen to ignore. "Now," Mr. Davies said, turning back to his keyboard, "let's secure it." We went to work. We immediately froze the small joint checking account Sarah had access to, the one I put a small allowance in for her to buy household essentials. We canceled the supplementary credit card she used for groceries, and, as I suspected, for clothes and dinners out with Mike. Then, we opened a new, private account at a different partner bank and initiated a transfer of the majority of my investment funds. "This creates a firewall," he explained. "Even if they somehow try to pressure you regarding these local accounts, your core nest egg will be untouchable." I walked out of that bank an hour later feeling 10 feet tall. Instead of going straight to my next appointment, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to a small cafe I used to love, ordered a cappuccino and a pastry, and sat by the window alone. I watched people walk by, living their own lives. For the first time, I didn't feel a pang of loneliness. I felt a sense of possibility. My life wasn't over. It wasn't some slow, sad decline into irrelevance. A new chapter was just beginning. I could sit in cafes. I could travel. I could do anything I wanted. I savored every bite of the almond croissant, a small, delicious act of rebellion. My final stop of the day was the office of my lawyer, Arthur Vance. He was a sharp, old-school attorney who didn't waste words. I explained the situation, and he got straight to the point. Your will is one thing, Helen, but that only matters after you're gone. We need to protect you now. They could try to have you declared incompetent to gain power of attorney. It's a nasty, common tactic. My stomach twisted, but his grim warning only hardened my resolve. What do you suggest? I asked. We put the house into an irrevocable living trust, effective immediately, he said. You will be the trustee, so you retain full control. But legally, the asset is protected from any future claims. It means they can't touch it. They can't force a sale. They can't use it as leverage. It becomes a fortress with you as the gatekeeper. He also drew up a new, durable power of attorney, naming my sister Jean as my sole agent, to be activated only if I were medically proven to be incapacitated. We voided my old will, the one that left everything to Sarah and the grandchildren. We'll leave the beneficiary line blank for now, Arthur said. You can decide who is worthy of your legacy when the dust settles. When I finally got home late that afternoon, the house was a mess. Dishes were in the sink, Leo's backpack was exploding all over the floor, and Mike was asleep on the sofa with the TV blaring. The familiar scene didn't spark the usual wave of resentment. I just felt detached. It was like looking at a diorama of a life I was about to leave behind. Mike stirred as I walked past. Hey, he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. You were gone a long time. Where'd you go? Just sorting a few things out, I replied, my voice light and airy. Tying up some loose ends. He grunted and rolled over, completely uninterested. He had no idea the loose ends I was tying up were the ones that connected me to them. He had no idea the fortress was already being built, and the gate was about to swing shut. The following week was a strange exercise in double consciousness. On the outside, I was the same Helen. I cooked, I cleaned, I ran the household on a silent, efficient autopilot. But on the inside, I was a detective, a sociologist studying a foreign tribe. I watched them with a new, clinical detachment, and what I saw chilled me to the bone. I saw Mike spend $300, money I knew came from the household account I funded, on a new gaming headset, claiming it was for networking calls. I watched Sarah come home with shopping bags from expensive stores, hiding them in her closet as if I wouldn't see the credit card statement later. I saw Leo and Chloe throw away half-eaten lunches I had woken up at 6 a.m. to prepare. Complaining they wanted takeout instead, they were living in a bubble of blissful ignorance, completely unaware that the ecosystem supporting them was about to collapse. They treated my resources like an infinite, regenerating wellspring, never once wondering about the source. My simmering resolve hardened into something diamond-sharp. I was not just doing this for my own dignity. I was doing this because they needed to be woken up from their self-induced coma. The final dinner, the one that erased any lingering whisper of doubt, happened on a Friday night. I had made lasagna from scratch, a dish that used to be a family favorite. As I sat at the head of the table, my usual spot, though it felt less like a position of honor and more like the seat of the chief servant, Mike started talking. He had that insufferable, dreamy look in his eyes he got whenever he was fantasizing about a life he hadn't earned. You know, Sarah, he began, gesturing around the dining room with his fork, I was thinking. Once we get this place properly organized, we could really open it up. Sarah perked up, catching his drift immediately. What were you thinking? She asked, a conspiratorial glint in her eye. Well, Mike said, completely ignoring my presence. We could knock out that wall between the kitchen and here. Create a real open concept space. And your mom's room? It gets the best afternoon light. It would make an incredible home office for me. Way better than that dingy corner I'm in now. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. They were redecorating my life out from under me, speaking about my bedroom as if it were already a vacant property. Oh, that's a great idea. Sarah chimed in. And we could finally get new furniture, something more modern. This stuff is so dated. She gestured vaguely at the solid oak dining table I had saved for 2 years to buy. The children, picking up on their parents' tone, giggled. It was a game to them. I wasn't a person at the table. I was a placeholder, a temporary resident whose space would soon be put to better use. I looked down at my plate, at the meal I had spent hours preparing, and I felt nothing but a profound, icy calm. They had just given me my closing argument. That night, after the house fell silent, I began to pack. It didn't take long. My life had been whittled down to necessities years ago. I pulled out a small carry-on suitcase, the one I had bought a decade earlier for a trip to the coast I never ended up taking. As I folded my few good dresses and sensible sweaters, my hand brushed against a small, wooden box at the back of my drawer. Inside was a faded postcard of the Amalfi Coast in Italy, a picture of vibrant houses cascading down a cliff to a sparkling blue sea. A friend had sent it to me 30 years ago. I remembered pinning it to my mirror, promising myself that one day, I would go there. But then Sarah needed braces, then it was a down payment for her first car, then her college tuition. One day never came. I looked at the postcard, at that beautiful, impossible dream. I smiled, tucked it gently into the side pocket of my suitcase, and zipped it up. I wasn't leaving my dream behind this time. I was taking it with me. I sat down at the small desk in my room with a pen and a few sheets of crisp, clean paper. It was time to write the letter. My hand was perfectly steady. To Sarah, Mike, Leo, and Chloe, I am writing this because I will be gone by the time you wake up. This morning, I found the brochure for the Maple Creek assisted living facility you left on the counter. I understand you have been making plans for my future. So, I decided to make my own. For the last 5 years, I have supported this household entirely. Since you seem to be unaware of the logistics, let me be clear. I have paid the mortgage, the property taxes, the electricity, the gas, the water, and the internet. I have paid for the food you eat, the car insurance, the clothes you wear, and the medical bills. I have a few questions for you. Sarah, did you believe your part-time retail salary was enough to cover the grocery bills for a family of 5? Mike, did you ever wonder who paid for the high-speed internet you used for 8 hours a day while you looked for promising opportunities? Leo and Chloe, did you think the money for your school trips, new sneakers, and pizza nights grew on trees in the backyard? It seems you saw me not as a mother or a grandmother, but as a household utility that was becoming inconvenient. You have been discussing what to do with my room when I am gone. Now you can have the whole house, for 30 days. This house, and everything in it, belongs to me. It is protected in a legal trust that you cannot touch. I am giving you 1 month's notice to find somewhere else to live. You will need to find jobs that can support your lifestyle, or, for the first time, learn to live within your means. A list of all the monthly bills and their due dates is on the table for your reference. Do not try to contact me. When you have learned to stand on your own 2 feet and can look at me as a person who deserves respect, I will decide if I want a place in your lives again. I am not doing this out of anger. I am doing this out of love. The kind of love that finally includes myself. Sincerely, Helen. Martini folded the letter and placed it in an envelope. I walked downstairs into the silent, dark house. On the kitchen table, I laid the envelope down. Next to it, I placed the keys to the house they would soon have to leave. The now useless supplementary credit card cut neatly in half. And a detailed list of every single bill, from the mortgage information to the trash collection fee. I took one last look around the room that held the memories of my entire adult life. There was no sadness. No regret. Only the quiet, clean feeling of a debt being settled. I went back to my room, set my alarm for 4:30 a.m., and lay down on my bed, fully dressed, waiting for the dawn of my new life. The taxi arrived at 4:45 a.m., a pair of faint headlights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. I slipped out the back door without a sound, my small suitcase feeling as light as a feather. As the car pulled away from the curb, I allowed myself one last glance at the house. It looked dark and quiet, a sleeping giant, completely unaware of the bomb I had just planted in its kitchen. I didn't feel a pang of sadness. I felt like a prisoner tasting freedom for the first time. The driver took me across town to a neighborhood I'd only ever passed through, stopping in front of a modest but clean-looking apartment building. My sister Jean was already there, waiting on the front steps with a warm coat pulled over her pajamas and 2 steaming mugs of coffee in her hands. She didn't say much. Just wrapped me in a fierce hug and handed me a mug. "Welcome home, Helen," she said, her voice thick with emotion. The apartment was small but bright, with a large window overlooking a small park. Jean had already brought over a few essentials, a loaf of bread, butter, a new kettle, and a fluffy set of towels. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, we sat on a pair of folding chairs Jean had brought, sipping our coffee in comfortable silence. It was the most peaceful morning I had experienced in 5 years. Back at my old house, the chaos erupted at exactly 7:15 a.m. It was Leo who sounded the first alarm. "Mom, Grandma didn't make breakfast. I'm gonna be late," he yelled from the bottom of the stairs. Sarah trudged down, her face a mask of annoyance. "For heaven's sake, what is wrong with her?" she muttered, walking into the kitchen. And then she stopped dead. The first thing she saw was the envelope, sitting stark and white in the middle of the table. Next to it, the 2 halves of her supplementary credit card lay like a severed lifeline. Her blood ran cold. With trembling hands, she tore the envelope open, her eyes scanned the first few lines, her face draining of all color. The words "assisted living" and "making my own plans" seemed to leap off the page. "Mike," she screamed, a raw, primal sound of pure panic. "Mike, get down here. Now." Mike stumbled into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and confused, just as Sarah was frantically reading the part about the 30-day notice. "What is this? What's going on?" he demanded. Sarah couldn't speak. She just shoved the letter into his hand. Mike's reaction was a slow burn explosion. As he read, his face shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to a deep, blotchy red of pure rage. He finished the letter and slammed his fist on the table, rattling the salt shaker. Is this a joke? He roared. She can't do this. After everything we've done for her? Letting her live here? The sheer audacity of his words hung in the air. Sarah, finally finding her voice, was already in problem-solving mode. My card, she stammered, pointing at the bisected piece of plastic. She cut up my card. She grabbed her phone, her fingers flying across the screen as she pulled up her mobile banking app. She tapped in the login for the joint household account. Access denied. Password invalid. She tried again. Access denied. She locked me out. Sarah shrieked, looking at Mike with wide, terrified eyes. She changed the password. The money for the groceries, the gas? It's all in there. That's when Mike truly lost it. That manipulative old woman. He yelled, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. She's trying to ruin us. All because we were trying to find her a better living situation. He conveniently ignored the part about it being a budget facility with shared rooms. In his mind, he was the victim. While they were spiraling, I was methodically unpacking my suitcase in my new sunlit bedroom. Jean helped me make the bed with fresh linens. How do you feel? She asked gently. I paused, holding a stack of sweaters. Quiet, I replied. My mind feels quiet for the first time in a very long time. There were no schedules to keep, no meals to plan, no passive-aggressive comments to deflect. There was only the calm, simple task of putting my life in order. My order back in the chaos. Sarah was frantically trying to call me. My old number went straight to a generic voicemail box that was already full. My new number, known only to Jean and my lawyer, was silent. They were completely cut off. What do we do? Sarah wailed, sinking into a chair, the list of bills I'd left spread out before her like a death sentence. The mortgage payment alone was more than she earned in a month. We call your sister, Mike snapped, grabbing his keys. Jean has to know where she is. We're going over there and we're going to put an end to this nonsense. They arrived at Jean's neat suburban house 20 minutes later. Mike pounded on the front door while Sarah stood behind him, looking wrecked. Jean opened the door, her expression as calm and solid as a brick wall. She didn't open the screen door. What do you want, Mike? She asked, her voice dangerously even. We want to see Helen, he demanded. This little stunt of hers has gone on long enough. You need to tell her to come home. Sarah pushed past him. Aunt Jean, please, she begged, her voice cracking. We're in trouble. We need to talk to her. We don't have any money. Jean looked from Mike's furious face to Sarah's tear-streaked one, and not an ounce of pity showed in her eyes. First of all, she said, her voice cutting through the morning air, you are not in trouble. You are experiencing consequences. There's a difference. And second, Helen isn't here. She paused, letting the lie hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final blow. And even if she were, after what you two did, I wouldn't let you within 100 feet of her. Jean's words hit them with the force of a physical blow. Mike, accustomed to blustering his way through problems, seemed to shrink. He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. Sarah just stared at her aunt, the last bit of hope draining from her face. You need to leave, Jean continued, her voice softening just a fraction, but her eyes remaining firm. Screaming at my front door isn't going to pay your mortgage. Your mother gave you a gift, Sarah. 30 days. Most people don't get that. I suggest you use that time wisely instead of trying to chase down the woman you threw away. Without another word, she closed the inner door, leaving them standing alone on the porch with the crushing weight of their new reality. They turned and walked back to their car, for the first time, in complete silence. The argument was over. The consequences had begun. The next 6 months were a quiet revelation for me. The small apartment, which had at first felt a little empty, began to fill up with my own life. I joined a community gardening club that met in the park across the street. I learned the names of plants I'd never had time to notice before, lavender and verbena, salvia and echinacea. I spent my afternoons with my hands in the dirt, surrounded by other women my age, women with their own stories of resilience. We talked about soil and sunlight. But we also talked about children, about disappointments, and about the quiet joy of cultivating something beautiful for yourself. My days took on a gentle, pleasing rhythm that was entirely my own. I woke with the sun, not with an alarm clock. I read the newspaper from front to back while I drank my coffee. I took long walks, exploring the small shops in my new neighborhood. I rediscovered the simple pleasure of my own company. I was no longer a ghost in someone else's house. I was the master of my own small, peaceful kingdom. The constant, low-level anxiety that had hummed beneath the surface of my life for years simply vanished. In its place was a profound sense of calm. Then, one sunny afternoon, a letter arrived. It was addressed to me, in care of my sister Jean. The handwriting was a familiar, youthful scrawl. It was from Leo. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Dear Grandma, I don't know if you'll get this. Aunt Jean said she would pass it along. A lot has changed here. We moved out of your house last month. We live in a small apartment now, over by the highway. Chloe and I have to share a room. At first, I hated it. Mom works full-time now, at a different store where she's a manager. She's tired a lot, but she's also different. She taught me how to make scrambled eggs. Dad has 2 jobs. He works at a warehouse during the day and delivers pizzas some nights. He doesn't sit on the computer anymore. He helped me with my science project last week. We actually talked. It's been really hard. But Mom said it's our own fault. She said we didn't see you, and now we have to learn to see each other. I guess I'm just writing to say I'm sorry. For complaining about your toast and for being on my phone at dinner. You were always there, and I never even noticed. I hope you're happy in your new place, love, Leo. I folded the letter and held it to my chest, tears finally streaming down my face. They weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of hope. My painful decision had done more than just free me. It had forced them to become a family. A few months later, I had a chance encounter. I was in the produce aisle of a large grocery store when I heard a familiar voice say, "Mom." I turned, and there was Sarah. She looked different. Thinner, maybe, and definitely more tired. The designer handbag was gone, replaced by a simple cloth tote. But her eyes were clearer than I had ever seen them. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady. An awkward silence hung between us for a moment. "You look good," she said finally. "Healthy." "I feel good," I replied honestly. She wrung her hands, looking down at her shopping cart, which held store-brand cereal and a small pack of ground beef. "Listen," she started, then took a deep breath. "I don't want anything. I needed to say it. I'm sorry. For everything. For the brochure, for the way we talked about you, for taking everything for granted. For all of it. You were right." The apology was quiet, unadorned, and completely genuine. It was the apology I had waited years to hear. I looked at my daughter, this woman who was finally learning to stand on her own, and I felt a wave of love that was no longer tangled up with obligation or resentment. "Thank you for saying that, Sarah," I said softly. "It means a lot. I wish you well." We stood there for another moment, a silent understanding passing between us. Then, with a small, sad smile, she nodded and pushed her cart down the aisle. I had lost the dependent child I had enabled for so long. But I had just caught the first glimpse of the strong, responsible woman she could become. That evening, back in my apartment. I watered the small pot of lavender on my windowsill, its scent filling the quiet air. I walked over to my calendar, a new one for the coming year. It wasn't filled with other people's needs. It was filled with possibilities. Gardening club meeting. Coffee with Jean. Library book sale. My eyes drifted to the small, framed postcard on my side table, the vibrant cliffs of the Amalfi Coast. I picked up my tablet, opened a travel website, and typed "flights to Naples" into the search bar. A list of dates and prices filled the screen. It was no longer an impossible dream. It was a plan. As I looked at the screen, a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. My name is Helen Martin, and my life was just beginning. And that brings us to the end of Helen's story. It's such a powerful reminder that it is never, ever too late to reclaim your own life and demand the respect that you deserve. What did you think of Helen's final decision? Was it too harsh, or was it the only way for everyone to truly heal and grow? We would love to read your thoughts and perspectives in the comments below. And if Helen's journey resonates with you, perhaps you have a similar story of setting a difficult but necessary boundary. Sharing your experience can be incredibly powerful for others who might be going through the same thing. If this story moved you, please take a moment to give this video a like to show your support. It helps our channel immensely and allows us to bring more stories like this to you. And of course, if you want to hear more dramatic and thoughtful stories of struggle, strength, and quiet revolution, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. No matter what chaos you may be navigating in your own life, remember that just like for Helen, a new morning filled with peace and hope is always possible. Be well, and take care of yourselves.